Hello. Oh, sorry. Oh, I just got it. Okay. Hello. Good afternoon. It is time for Frankenstein Tea. Welcome. Frankenstein Tea is a daily program from the Island Free Library. It is an afternoon check-in for adult listeners. I read an adult short story, and you get to check in with yourself with the Island Free Library. We get to check in with you, see how you're doing, see how everybody's doing. Today, let's see, I can't even really, I'm kind of tired here. Today is Wednesday, I believe. My computer tells me it's July 29th, 2020. That's easier for me than the actual day. I think it is Wednesday. We have bright skies and sunshine, despite, I thought maybe it was going to rain on Block Island today, but it didn't. And so we continue. Gosh, it's really quite dry and dusty. And, the ground out there is very thirsty. The birds, somebody told me the other day, the birds are thirsty. Yes, the birds are thirsty. The ground is thirsty. The flowers and our vegetable gardens are thirsty. Our lawns, brown pits our lawns are. We haven't had rain in quite some time, but not today, even though I thought it might this morning. I wasn't quite sure what it was doing. My dad just logged on. Hi, Dad. This is a live program every day. I started this program in March. We were in shelter in place. Many of you were probably in shelter in place. It was a chance for us to do some adult programming, right? We had started up Kids Story Hour and kids, a family read aloud for, age appropriate for everybody in the household. And I was, itchy to get my hands on some adults and stay connected to adults. And I continue that today. I have my mind on that. I hear that there are people that are still not coming out of their homes on Block Island. I don't know if it's new or if it's continued or if it's both, but there seems to be a sentiment of not coming into town. I'm not coming into that craziness. And let's be realistic here, right? We always have that in summer. There are a lot of people who prefer not to come into town and not to come into the craziness of summer. But of course, it's exaggerated this year with COVID and and people mask wearing and not mask wearing and social distancing and not social distancing and feeling like that's a little bit of a risk to come into town. So I hear you. I'm listening. I'm watching my community. I'm listening to my community. I'm trying to stay in tune with what's happening out here. And so I will continue to do this program, and you can maybe it's helpful. I'm always hopeful that it is helpful for you to have some connection to us at the library and to your own community, and to enjoy a short story every day. Every day I'm here at 3:00, and I'm generally live. I can't say I'm live every day. I do have appointments and errands, and I try to take a little bit of time off on my days off. Imagine that, taking time off on your day off. Doesn't always happen. It definitely doesn't always happen during a pandemic. So, but I try to be live, and I am live today. My clock says 3:06, so here we are. I am in the upper level of the Island Free Library. This is the reference collection. There's some cool things behind me. Enjoy them, or don't even watch. I'm going to read. This is a listening program. You don't have to watch. I hope you have something cool to drink. I hope you're ready to take a little time out. I'm going to read from a book that we got in last week. It is Children of the Night, the best short stories by Black writers. What does it say? 1967 to the present, but it's not to present 2020. This was published 1995. Gloria Naylor is the editor of this, and it's published by Little Brown and Company. It's a collection of short stories by Black writers in here that I liked, but I'm going to save it. I'm not going to do that story today. I'm going to read this other story that I also liked. So enjoy. This is called Secondhand Man, and it is by Rita Dove. Virginia couldn't stand it when someone tried to shorten her name, like Ginny, for example. But James Evans didn't. He set his 12-string guitar down real slow. "Miss Virginia," he said, "you're a fine piece of woman." Seemed he'd been asking around, knew everything about her, knew she was bold and proud and didn't cotton to no one silly. "Virginia," he said, nice and slow, almost Russian the way he said it. Right then and there, she knew this man was for her. He courted her just inside a year, came by nearly every day. First, she wouldn't see him for more than half an hour at a time. She'd send him away. He knew better than to try to force her. Another fellow did that once, kept coming by when she said she had other things to do. She told him he did it once more, she'd be waiting at the door with a pot of scalding water to teach him some manners. Did, too. Fool didn't believe her. She had the pot waiting on the stove, and when he came up those stairs, she was standing in the door. He took one look at her face and turned and ran. He was lucky those steps were so steep. She only got a little piece of his pant leg. No, James knew his stuff. He'd come on time and stay till she told him he needed to go. She'd met him out at Summit Beach one day. In the 20s, that was the place to go on hot summer days. Clean yellow sand all around the lake and an amusing morning to midnight. She went there with a couple of girlfriends. They were younger than her and a little silly, but they were sweet. Virginia was 19 then. "High time," everyone used to say to her, but she'd just lift her head and go on about her business. She weren't going to marry just any old Negro. He had to be perfect. There was a man who was chasing her around about that time. Tall, dark. Sterling Williams was his name. Pretty as a panther. Married, he was. Least that's what everyone said. Left a wife in Washington, D.C. A little crazy, the wife. Poor Sterling was trying to get a divorce. Well, Sterling was at Summit Beach that day too. He followed Virginia around, trying to buy her root beer. Everybody loved root beer that summer. Root beer and vanilla ice cream. The Boston cooler. But she wouldn't pay him no mind. People said she was crazy. Sterling was the best cat. Sterling wouldn't give up. He kept buying root beers and having to drink them himself. Then she saw James. He'd come up from Tennessee, working his way up on the riverboats. Folk in the town and said he was never coming back. Well, when she saw this cute little man in a straw hat and a 12-string guitar under his arm, she got a little flustered. Her girlfriends whispered around to find out who he was, but she acted like she didn't even see him. He was the hit of Summit Beach. Played that 12-string guitar like a devil. They'd take off their shoes and sit on the beach toward evening. All the girls loved James. "Oh, Jimmy," they'd squeal, "play us a love song." He'd laugh and pick out a tune. "I'll give you $1 if you'll come out tonight. If you'll come out tonight, if you'll come out tonight, I'll give you $1 if you'll come out tonight and dance by the light of the moon." Then the girls would giggle. Jimmy, they'd scream, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. He'd sing the second verse then. I danced with a girl with a hole in her stocking and her heel kept a rockin', her heel kept a rockin'. I danced with a girl with a hole in her stocking and we danced by the light of the moon. Then they'd all priss and preen their feathers and wonder which would be best, to be in fancy clothes and go on being courted by this dull factory fellows, or to have a hole in their stockings and dance with James. Virginia never danced. She sat a bit off to one side and watched them make fools of themselves. Then one night, near season's end, they were all sitting down by the water, and everyone had on sweaters and was in a foul mood because the cold weather was coming and there wouldn't be no more parties. Someone said something about hating having the good times end, and James struck up a nice and easy tune, looking across the fire straight at Virginia. As I was lumbering down the street, down the street, down the street, a handsome gal I chanced to meet. Oh, she was fair to view. I'd like to make that gal my wife, gal my wife, gal my wife. I'd be happy all my life if I had her by me. She knew he was the man. She'd known it a long while, but she was just biding her time. He called on her the next day. She said she was busy canning peaches. He came back the day after. They sat on the porch and watched the people go by. He didn't talk much, except to say her name like that. Virginia Nie, he'd say, you're a mighty fine woman. She sent him home a little after that. He showed up again a week later. She was angry at him and told him she didn't have time for playing around. But he'd brought his 12-string guitar and he said he'd been practicing all week just to play a couple of songs for her. She let him in then and made him sit on the stool while she sat on the porch swing. He sang the first song. It was a floor thumper. There is a gal in our town. She wears a yellow striped gown, and when she walks the streets around, the hole in her foot makes a hole in the ground. Old folks, young folks, clear the kitchen. Old folks, young folks, clear the kitchen. Old Virginia never tire. She got a little mad then, but she knew he was baiting her, seeing how much she would take. She knew he wasn't singing about her, and she'd already heard how he said her name. It was time to let the dog in out of the rain, even if he shook his wet all over the floor. So she leaned back and put her hands on her hips real slow. I just know you ain't singing about me. Virginia, he replied with a grin would have put Rudolph Valentino to shame. I'd never sing about you that way. He pulled a yellow scarf out of his trouser pocket. Like melted butter it was, with fringes. I saw it yesterday and thought how nice it would look against your skin, he said. That was the first present she ever accepted from a man. Then he sang his other song. I'm coming, Virginia, I'm coming to stay. Don't hold it again me for running away. If I can win ya, I'll never more roam. I'm coming, Virginia, my Dixieland home. She was gone for him. Not like those girls on the beach. She had enough sense left to crack a joke or two. You saying I look like the state of Virginia? She asked, and he laughed, but she was gone. She didn't let him know it, though, not for a long while. Even when he asked her to marry him 8 months later, he was trembling and thought she might just refuse out of some woman's whim. No, he courted her proper, every day for a little while. They'd sit on the porch until it got too cold, and then they'd sit in the parlor with 2 or 3 bright lamps on. Her mother and father were glad Virginia'd found a beau, but they weren't taking any chances. Everything had to be proper. He got down, all trembly, on one knee and asked her to be his wife. She said yes. There's a point when all this dignity and stuff get in the way of destiny. He kept on trembling. He didn't believe her. What? He said. I said yes, Virginia answered. She was starting to get angry. Then he saw that she meant it, and he went into the other room to ask her father for her hand in marriage. But people are too curious for their own good, and there's some things they never need to know, but they're going to find them out one way or the other. James had come all the way up from Tennessee, and that should have been far enough, but he couldn't hide that snake anymore. It just crawled out from under the rock when it was good and ready. The snake was Jeremiah Morgan. Some fellows from Akron had gone off for work on the riverboats, and some of these fellows had heard about James. That 12-string guitar and straw hat of his had made him pretty popular. So, story got to town that James had a baby somewhere, and joined up to this baby, but long dead and buried, was a wife. Virginia had been married 6 months when she found out from sweet-talking, sidestepping Jeremiah Morgan, who never liked her nohow after she laid his soul to rest one night when he'd taken her home from a dance. She always carried a brick in her purse. No man could get the best of her. Jeremiah must have been the happiest man in Akron that day, he found out. He found it out later than most people. Things like that have a way of circulating first among those who know how to keep it from spreading to the wrong folks. Then, when the gossip's gotten to everyone else, it's handed over to the one who knows what to do with it. Ask that husband of yourn what else he left in Tennessee besides his best friend, was all Jeremiah said at first. No good Jeremiah Morgan could make Virginia beg for information. She wouldn't bite. I ain't got no need for asking my husband nothing, she said, and walked away. She was going to choir practice. He stood where he was, yelled after her like any old common person. Mrs. Evans always talking about being number one. Looks like she's number two after all. Her ears burned from the shame of it. She went on to choir practice and sang her prettiest. And straight when she was back home, she asked, "What's all this number two business?" James broke down and told her the whole story. How he'd been married before when he was 17, and his wife dying in childbirth, and the child not quite right because of being blue when it was born. And how, when his friend was strung up, he saw no reason for staying. And how, when he met Virginia, he found out pretty quick what she'd done to Sterling Williams, and that she'd never have no secondhand man, and he had to have her, so he never said a word about his past. She took off her coat and hung it in the front closet. She unpinned her hat and set it in its box on the shelf. She reached in the back of the closet and brought out his hunting rifle and the box of bullets. She didn't see no way out but to shoot him. "Put that down," he shouted. "I love you." "You were right not to tell me," she said, "because I sure as sin wouldn't have married you. I don't want you now." "Virginia," he said. He was real scared. "How can you shoot me down like this?" No, she couldn't shoot him when he stood there looking at her with those sweet brown eyes, telling her how much he loved her. "You have to sleep sometime," she said, and sat down to wait. He didn't sleep for 3 nights. He knew she meant business. She sat up in their best chair with the rifle across her lap, but he wouldn't sleep. He sat at the table and told her over and over that he loved her and he hadn't known what else to do at the time. "When I get through killing you," she told him. I'm going to write to Tennessee and have them send that baby up here. It won't do farming a child out to any relative with an extra plate. She held on to that rifle. Not that he would have taken it from her. Not that that would have saved him. No, the only thing would have saved him was running away, but he wouldn't run either. Sitting there, Virginia had lots of time to think. He was afraid of what she might do, but he wouldn't leave her either. Some of what he was saying began to sink in. He had lied, but that was the only way to get her. She could see the reasoning behind that. And except for that, he was perfect. It was hardly like having a wife before at all. And the baby, anyone could see the marriage wasn't meant to be anyway. On the third day, about midnight, she laid down the rifle. You will join the choir and settle down instead of plucking on that guitar anytime anyone drop a hat, she said. And we will write to your aunt in Tennessee and have that child sent up here. Then she put the rifle back in the closet. The child never made it up to Ohio. It had died a month before Jeremiah ever opened his mouth. That hit James hard. He thought it was his fault and all, but Virginia made him see the child was sick and was probably better off with its maker than it would be living out half a life. James made a good tenor in the choir. The next spring, Virginia had her first baby, and they decided to name her Belle. That's French for beautiful. And she was, too. That was Secondhand Man by Rita Dove. Rita Dove was the Poet Laureate of the United States, recipient of the Pulitzer Prize for her poetry collection, Thomas and Beulah. She is the author of Fifth Sunday, a collection of short stories. She lives in Virginia and is a professor at the University of Virginia, Charlottesville. That's her biography from when this book was published in 1995. I did not Google her. I'm not sure if she is still alive or still teaching. Thanks for coming today. I'll see you tomorrow at 3:00 for another episode of Frankenstein Tea. Everybody stay well. Wear your mask, wash your hands, social distance. Town Council is meeting tonight via Zoom. I know the governor spoke today. Let's see where we're going tomorrow, Rhode Island. Have a good afternoon. Bye, Dad. Bye, Mom, if you're out there. Peace.